So let's start things off. And so what do you do at your work? What does the let me just get the name again. USGS do?
So the USGS is an earth science agency. We do lots of things by the name, geological survey. You probably deduce that there are some people in the USGS, actually a lot, that do geology, volcanoes, earthquakes, mapping, mineral resources, uh, stuff like that. We do a lot of other things beyond geology. So we have people working in natural hazards. We have people working in biology and ecology. We have folks working in energy, minerals, and uh, toxins. And we have people working in water, and I am in the water mission area. So the science in the USGS is broken up into a bunch of chunks. I'm in the water chunk,
Mhm.
um, and
Well, that seems
so
perfect since all of our topics are ocean related. So yeah.
Quick question.
yeah.
About for acidity, for ocean acidity, what do you think is like a main focus on when looking into ocean acidification?
Um, so this is one of the places where I'm going to give full disclosure. It's not
Mhm.
ocean acidification is not one of my areas of expertise, but I know that it's a particular concern, and maybe if you've read up at all about it, you probably have found that it's a particular concern to the health and survival of coral reefs.
Yeah.
Yeah, we definitely did some research, and we definitely saw a lot of reports of coral reefs and bleaching. I'm pretty sure it was where the
Mhm.
corals would like turn white. I'm pretty sure, and then they'd like die off, and it would hurt the entire ecosystem because it would destroy the producers.
Yeah,
Absolutely awful. Uh,
yes. I mean, acidification can also, like, one reason why ocean acidification um, negatively affects coral reefs is that coral reefs need carbonate
Mhm.
or yeah, carbonate to build their skeletons, and acidification kind of interrupts the chemistry that allows the reefs to use or to access that carbonate. And in a similar way, other ocean organisms that need carbonate to build shells, such as shellfish and other organisms, uh, they can also, their populations and their bodies as individuals can be weakened by the lack of carbonate that they can access due to the acidification process. And so that can also disrupt food webs.
Mhm.
It's not
actually,
just, these, often when you disrupt or weaken one species within an ecosystem, uh, that disruption or weakening can proliferate to other parts of the food web. So, but that's probably the limit of what I know about acidifications.
that's perfectly fine. That's already a lot more than maybe not a lot more, but that's more than we knew because I didn't know it was affecting other species like uh crabs, shellfish, and stuff like that. As I said, I did a little bit of research in some of the topics, of course, already, but you know, I kept it a little brief. That's actually a little bit interesting how it affects the mammals as well. So, sort of to summarize, you are a computational scientist who
Mhm.
specializes in water-based physics, or would that be fluid dynamics? I'm sorry, I'm not entirely
Yeah,
sure.
fluid dynamics.
So fluid
Yeah.
dynamics and also phytoplankton, so
Yes.
microscopic marine biology.
Yes.
Okay,
Exactly.
so seems like we got the perfect person for this interview. Okay, so going on to one of our topics, we'll go start off with the water pollution. That sound good with you?
Mhm.
Sure.
Okay, so a few questions I had to start off with is I know there's definitely a lot of different pollution. I know that different pollutions are going to cause different problems. Like, for example, straws kill turtles. Like, an oil spill would cause a vastly different problem than just a straw. So, I had a
Mhm.
few questions I wanted to ask you relating to that. First off, what do you think a very common item that people might not think is very dangerous or important that's actually detrimental? Like, say if I had a candy wrapper, most people think, oh, if I throw a candy wrapper away, it won't be too bad. Is that actually like really horrendous or something? It could be anything. Is there anything that you think causes a lot more harm than people actually think? Or is there anything
That's
that you
such
like
a
think
good
causes?
question, Emmett. Well, I think it's becoming more well known, and since you guys are pretty informed, you've probably heard about it. But plastic, any kind of
Mhm.
plastic, is a really big problem, and it is probably all been a big problem for a long time, but we're just starting to really learn about the magnitude of the effects. Plastic can, whether it starts out big or small, well, number one, it can last for hundreds of years
Yeah,
in
I've
the
heard
environment.
about that in like the Pacific garbage patch, right? The
Exactly.
giant floating bunch of plastic that's just bound together by strings and rope, right?
Right. So, but it can also disintegrate into little particles that can get into water systems and various products that we
I have to
use.
ask you about that because I thought the whole problem with plastics was that they didn't break down and that they didn't decompose or anything like that. But now you're telling me that they break down in these tiny little pieces.
I think they do. And again, this is not kind of where I spend my time studying, but what I have heard is that they can break down into little pieces. And it doesn't mean that they go away. They're just in smaller pieces, smaller and smaller pieces.
So I want to ask, so do microplastics also have a big detrimental on the planet Earth and itself on its climate?
I don't know about its effect on climate, but on organisms, I believe so, on aquatic organisms.
Mm.
Um, and
So
so, go ahead.
no, you can go. I was just gonna say, is this the reason why we need like water filters and stuff and like water processing plants and stuff like that? Do you think it's because of
Yeah.
microplastics?
Well, that and there, you asked me this really great question about what do we not think about? What do a lot of people not think about that can pollute the water? The different cosmetic products and facial scrubs with microparticles in them can get into the water supply. Um, uh, there's also an issue with medicines, pharmaceutical products
Medicines?
getting into the water supply.
How does that
Uh,
work?
yeah, so different ways. And again, not my area of expertise, but this is what I've
We'll move on to
learned,
your area of expertise
mostly
afterwards.
from my colleagues. But so we excrete uh, medicines when we, go to the bathroom, and that goes into the water supply. Sometimes medicines are just thrown out, and
Oh,
they'll be in a, a landfill and then leach into the groundwater. There are probably other ways that medicines get into the water, but there's also hormones from meats and other products that we buy to eat. Uh, growth hormones that are used to make chickens get bigger or pigs get bigger. Um, those can also get into
So Just a few questions. Does this also
And,
include like so you're saying that a bunch of drugs are getting into our water, right? Does this
Yeah.
also include other drugs like recreational drugs? Just spitballing questions here.
I don't know. I don't know the answer
Okay.
to that. Like one thing that I know is a big issue in a lot of waterways and water supplies is what they call endocrine disruptors, and
Mm,
they're um, hormones basically that can cause. They're known to have caused um, malformations in fish and uh, different aquatic animals
so just to
because
clarify,
they're getting
the
all this
wildlife.
stuff humans use. Go ahead.
So just to clarify, the wildlife is definitely being affected by this, like drastically, right?
Hmm.
Uh,
Yes.
Also, does this also affect the phytoplankton that you're talking about? Because I think they're really small. And a lot of these drugs are sort of in like tablet forms or like other stuff like that. I'm assuming that a lot of these would be physical objects that would be very difficult to be sort of digested or absorbed by a animal, unless it was like I guess in the water it could actually mix in. Never mind. Uh,
Yeah.
but does this like affect everything in the ocean and like across the world? Is it a
Probably
global
everything in the
problem?
ocean can be affected by some kind of pollution, if not multiple kinds of pollution. But I think something that you said earlier, Emmett, makes a lot of sense, which is that different pollutants have different kinds of effects, right? And so I don't know, maybe there's an effect of plastics on phytoplankton. I'm not aware of that, but um, but one kind of pollution, major kind of pollution that definitely has an effect on phytoplankton and is known to drive harmful algal blooms is nutrient pollution. I don't know if you've heard of that. Nitrogen
I
and
think we
phosphorus.
have. It's what causes a lot of the algal blooms to cause or happen because the algal
Exactly.
blooms are caused from a sudden burst in population, and these sudden bursts of population are often stimulated by a sudden abundance of nutrients.
Exactly. Exactly. And those kinds of pollution, I'm not sure if you've learned what the sources are, but huge population centers, we all go pee, we all go poo, you know,
Exactly.
and you've got wastewater treatment plants and sewage treatment plants, but they can't get all of the N and the P out of the P being phosphorus and being nitrogen. They can't get all of that out of the water
So
before you know before it gets ways. Huh?
is that how they grab their nutrients and start to produce from themselves? That's
The phytoplankton?
yes, phytoplankton.
Yes, they take dissolved forms of nutrients that are in the water,
Mhm.
um, and they take it up into the algal cells, and that plus sunlight and photosynthesis allows them to grow and divide and proliferate, along with the right hydrodynamic conditions and other conditions in the water and in the environment. But yes, they
Yeah,
need that nitrogen and phosphorus to grow.
just a sec. We're starting to run out of the time. As I stated, we only have till 5:45 because of how Zoom works. So
Okay,
we're probably gonna have to change topics. Sorry, about
that's
that.
okay. Did you want to talk a
So,
little longer? I could go a little bit, like start a new one at 5:45,
uh,
and I could go a little bit
Um,
longer if you wanted to.
we can. We could do that if we want, if we see the need. But just in
Okay,
case we don't want to, since we don't want to take any more time, because we already, since we already told you we were going to take till 5:45. We don't want to take too much longer
okay,
than that. So I
all
think we
right,
should start moving on to the next topic, which would be
sure,
flooding,
sure,
if, if that's okay with you, of course.
sure. I'll do my best with it. I
Okay.
have close colleagues that study flooding, so
Oh, so you know a lot about this topic.
I know a little bit.
Okay. What do you think are a few major causes of flooding? I'm just gonna rehash a question from last time, that people don't really think of when they think of flooding. Because I know a lot of people when they think of flooding, they think of huge dams being burst, having a hole in them, like the Hoover Dam, and it causing a huge flood and wiping out an entire city. But I feel like that's mostly like people thinking about like a fiction story or something exciting. I want something more realistic, something that people don't really think about when they think of a giant flood.
Okay. Well, so what you just described would be a flood coming from inland, from a river or a dammed river. But there can be flooding that comes from the other end of the system, from the ocean.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Um, the combination of sea level rise caused by global warming, which is a gradual process, um, combined with big coastal storms, that especially if they combine with also with a high tide, high water due to the tides, can cause enormous flooding from from the ocean end of the system in coastal areas. So you can have storm surge, which is when the wind pushes the water in a storm toward the coast. That's a big source of coastal flooding. Um, and that's episodic. That happens, over the course of hours and minutes. Sea level rise is a gradual source of flooding. That is a major area of study. Actually, both of those are major areas of study by my agency. Um, you can also get flooding from both ends of the system, where if you have, say, a big hurricane coming over a coastal area, like on the East Coast, it can cause storm surge due to the strong winds pushing water from the ocean toward the land. But then when that hurricane passes over the land, it can also drop a lot of precipitation, which causes flooding from in that way. So you can get kind of this two-sided flooding um, during an episodic event like a hurricane.
So there's thousands of causes for floods, just to clarify.
I don't know about thousands, but there are
Oh,
many.
maybe that was a bit much. But it sounds like a bit, though. I don't really think hurricanes were a flood. I thought of them sort of as their own individual thing.
Well, they can definitely cause a lot of flooding in coastal areas for sure.
Mhm.
And another, you asked about other causes of flooding. So there are some lands that have subsided, which means they've dropped in elevation. So are you familiar with the Delta, the Sacramento San Joaquin Delta, which is,
I don't think so, but I sort of know a little bit about this because, you know, I saw a little bit of the stuff I read about this. I did hear about, uh, I heard about some places on land. I think it was in the African continent, being like finding fossils of like aquatic dinosaurs because the land goes up and down and up and down.
okay. Oh,
So
interesting.
I know a little bit about that, but not
Okay.
probably not as much as you do.
So we were talking about flooding, and I think I was saying that if you look at a map of the bay and you go east of the bay, you'll see this big area with all of these channels and farmland, and that's called the Delta.
Yeah. Question. Are we talking about like uh is this like the lake connected to San Francisco? Like San Francisco Bay? Are we talking like up by Bay, like then further east?
Oh, it's upstream of San Pablo Bay. So um, Do you want me to bring up a map and
No,
tell you what
it's
I'm
fine. I just
talking
wanted
about?
to get a sort of a general idea of like where it was.
Yeah, so are
So
you looking at a map? There's San
I'm
Pablo
looking at a map
Bay,
right now. Is it sort of like
and
near Sacramento?
it's, yes, near it includes Sacramento. So it's
I
east
gotta
of
go.
Sassoon Bay, and it's this whole big area that used to be farm or marshland back in the 1800s or up to the like mid 1800s. And humans, I am getting to flooding, just so you know. Um,
It's fine. It doesn't really matter too much. You can just go on whatever you want.
so the it was this marshland, and humans came in and drained it and diked it off. So put these levees around it, and they did that because they wanted to convert it to farmland. And what happened over the years, so if you look at a map of the current day delta, you've got all of these channels. They probably look blue on your map, surrounding like these parcels of land, and those are it's mostly farmland. But because it was originally marshland, the soils are made of peat, which decomposes over time when air hits it, when it dries out. And so what has happened to that farmland all over the delta, I don't know how many acres, but maybe millions of acres, I'm not sure, it has subsided. The surface of that farmland has gone way down over the last century and a half. In some cases, 30 feet below sea level. So if you can imagine like your house, which is like a 2-story house, it's probably around 30 feet, or maybe not quite.
That's pretty significant.
Yeah. So so if you're sitting at on a piece of land that's subsided or gone down to 30 feet below sea level, and you've got this big levee or this big mound of dirt basically between you and a channel that's carrying water around your, outside of the levee. If that levee breaks, what's going to happen?
I hope nothing too bad.
You're going to flood. Your land is going to flood because the water is 30 feet higher than the land on the other side of the levee. So if somebody punches a hole in that levee, it's basically a barrier between the water and you. And so your whole piece of farmland will flood. So one of the big concerns regarding flooding in our state is, at least in the Delta, we've got all the subsided farmland, and we've got these fragile levees, like thousands of miles of fragile levees protecting the farmland from the water in the channels running around the farmland. And that farmland is 30 feet below sea level. So if a big earthquake strikes and causes those really not very well engineered levees to break, the farmland, actually major swaths of farmland can flood. So, and that could cause a water pollution problem, getting back to your, because
wouldn't there'd be a bunch of like, wouldn't there be a bunch of like fertilizer in the soil there since it's farmland? And wouldn't that cause, as we've already talked about with earlier about the algal blooms, so wouldn't that also cause some more what is it? Algal blooms, as I said, there'd be there'd be an abundance of nutrients and cause a sudden surge in population.
It could.
Algae.
It could. And also one other water quality problem that could happen if you had massive levee failure in an earthquake and levees broke and the farmland all flooded is I don't know if you know this, but the Delta is also the source of fresh water for California, the major source of fresh water for California. And we send a lot of fresh water down to Southern California and to the Central Valley from the Delta. But if the Delta were to basically break, the levees would break, and the farmland would flood, the Delta would take in a big gulp of salt water from the ocean. Ocean water would rush in upstream from the ocean and contaminate, or pollute the freshwater source for a whole chunk of California, because you can't irrigate farmland with salt water. You can't drink salt water. You can't use salt water for cooking. You can't give your
You can't
dog
use it for
salt water
plants
to
either,
drink.
I'm assuming,
What?
right? You can't use
Would
it for
say
plants either, I'm assuming.
no. So that's another kind of form of pollution that could happen in a system like ours, um, that's subject to earthquakes. So
That
anyway, so this is how
that seems a
flooding and
little poorly
water
designed.
can link together.
That seems poorly designed, at least in my
It
opinion.
it seems totally what?
Poorly designed.
Yes, you're right.
Like
You're
that
absolutely
seems like a
right.
huge problem if that does happen. There needs to be some countermeasures against that, doesn't there?
That's such a good question, Emmett. Um, yes, and people have been worrying about this and trying to figure out solutions to it for decades. And one solution that has been on and off the table for many decades is to run the water supply. The Sacramento River, you mentioned Sacramento earlier. The Sacramento River is the biggest river in California, and it's the main source of water to the Delta, of fresh water. And so, what they're planning on building again is a tunnel, or maybe a couple tunnels under the Delta, so it avoids all of those fragile levees and the risk of earthquake and other things that might
Like
break the levees and contaminate the water supply, and basically shunt it south of the Delta so it can get safely basically around the Delta and get shipped to Southern California and the Central
so
Valley.
they're basically trying to make a bath dam, or like or a drain. The drain you'd have in like a bath or a sink and put that in the river.
Yeah, basically take the river water and, yeah, put like a pipe, run it under the ground, under the Delta, under all that farmland, under all the levees, and
That seems like so much work. And how would you even go about making that?
oh, that's a good question. It's going to cost many billions of dollars, and
Billions.
billions, yes, many billions of
God.
dollars. So, but there,
And then
there are complications, because then the farmers in the Delta won't get the water they need to water, or at least I can't, I
so
shouldn't
they
say
need to at least keep some of
they,
the water still going to the
they're
delta.
worried that they won't. What?
So yeah, so as you said, they need to keep some of the water still going to the delta, but they also
Yes.
need to drive the majority of it away so it doesn't break the levees. That just seems like a total, like, just mess of engineering or
It's
city planning. I don't know.
yeah, and to operate it too once it's built, like to manage all of the different water rights and the different
I
people
didn't
and the
think about that.
ecosystem. Like an estuary needs fresh water by definition.
Yeah,
So
and also,
it's
if we're
yeah.
just putting drains and rivers now, I'd assume we'd also need to have like massive maintenance crews about that.
I bet you're right. It's going to be very complicated. So
like an absolute. That sounds like a logistical nightmare.
Yeah, it does. It
Dear
does. But
God.
they're trying, the idea is to preserve this major water supply for California, a fresh water supply, and for the Central Valley of California that produces half of the nation's produce, and keep it from going salty in a
I mean,
big way. So,
it's necessary, but as necessary as it is, it still seems like it's going to be a pain. Anyway, we've kept you here already longer than we originally planned. It's been an absolute joy having you here, and we do appreciate you helping us out with this.
well, it's been a joy for me to talk with you and Win, and you had great questions. Before I go, do you have any burning
Oh,
questions you hoped we'd get to?
I didn't really have many burning questions going into this. I don't really have any burning questions right now, but
Okay. Well, let me know
we
if you
always
do,
answer
and you
the
can feel
questions.
free to email me.
Mhm.
You can find me online at llucas@usgs.gov. I'd be happy to answer more questions.
Okay, thank you. Um, yeah,
Sure.
that's it.
Well, good luck, and it was really nice talking with you.
It was nice talking to you too.
Okay.
So yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Okay. Take care. Bye bye.
You too. Bye.